When I liken Trump's relationship with America to our relationships with our narcissistic ex-boyfriends, I get lots of like, oh yeah, that rings really true for me. There are lots of similarities, especially when we look at the kind of like narcissistic rage. We look at the escalation of behavior when you try to pull back. When you try to break away or you try to defend yourself, then he really cracks down. He really escalates the squeeze, the control, the elevation of threats and intimidation. And I think for so many, especially women in the United States, that is why Trump is so especially triggering, because he reminds us all of our narcissistic ex-boyfriend. Or maybe your dad was a malignant narcissist, but his behavior, the way he interacts with an entire country, is so familiar to those of us who have had to have a personal one-on-one relationship with a narcissist. And so this morning when I was drinking my coffee, I saw this piece in the Huffington Post and I was like, oh, look, it's so many of the things I've said that feel really familiar to me. But here is a real psychologist explaining her perspective on it. And so I want to share a little bit with you. It's called, I'm a psychologist who specializes in narcissists. Here's what we need to do to stop Trump. It's by Jocelyn Size, and it came out this morning, May 23rd, in the Huffington Post. The subtitle is The Same Patterns That Destabilize Families Destabilize Democracies. I just want to say, obviously, this is going to talk about some things that could be really triggering for you, but also could be really empowering as well. So I would encourage you to wade in with caution and keep in touch with yourself as you're listening, but also realize talking about the realities of what it's like to live in a country where we are governed by a malignant narcissist, where we are going to have to stand up against him if we're not already doing that. We're going to have to stand up against him harder. That's going to be really uncomfortable stuff to look at, but it's really, really important that we address it head on. Okay, so she says the Trump administration is planning a June 14th military parade to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army. Right, but really Trump says it's about celebrating his 79th birthday, which is also that day. It's going to be a big, huge military parade. They said he's securing at least 24 armored tanks and something like 150 other military vehicles to roll through the streets of Washington, D.C. Oh, and it's going to cost the American taxpayer at least $45 million. Okay, so the author says, when your sense of self-exaltation requires tanks, flyovers, and up to $45 million for a birthday party, we're no longer in the realm of cake and candles. We're squarely in criterion 1 of narcissistic personality disorder. Quote, a grandiose sense of self-importance, end quote. To be clear, I can't diagnose the president or any public figure without personal examination, but research shows that those in positions of power, especially in politics, are more likely to exhibit traits of grandiose narcissism. When narcissistic control seeps into leadership, it distorts the truth, it erodes trust, and it destabilizes institutions. The more we understand these dynamics, the better we can protect both the public and the health of our democracy. As a clinical psychologist who works with trauma and narcissistic abuse, I see echoes of this dynamic every day in my therapy office. The same patterns that destabilize families destabilize democracies. Along with the magnetic vision of those grandiose narcissists comes denial, attack, reversal of blame, and emotional chaos. I think of one of my patients when she discovered that her brother was terrorizing their elderly mother with violent threats and financial abuse. When she named the harm, he flipped the script, denying everything and accusing her of being unstable, all while fiercely protecting his golden boy image. Under family pressure to stay quiet, she spiraled into rumination, but armed with awareness and support, she stood firm. Like a broken record, she calmly named the harm until her boundary held. It came at a cost, but her brother was eventually removed from their mother's home. She held the line, y'all. She held the line. The same pattern shows up magnified on the political stage. Narcissistic control in government thrives on flipping the script and silencing watchdogs. Authoritarian leaders, like narcissistic family members, rely on well-worn tactics to manufacture a psychological state of volatile uncertainty, where outcomes aren't just unknown, but constantly shifting and unpredictable. This overwhelms the brain's ability to anticipate and prepare, keeping people mentally off balance and easier to control. The good news? Awareness works like a vaccine, gradually building psychological immunity against further harm. For another patient of mine, moving the goalposts was a favored tactic of her ex-boyfriend to generate volatility. He would make a demand under the guise of improving her and then change the expectation once it was met. In government, this looks like constantly reversing policies or public positions so that the citizens, media, and allies remained unmoored. Like Trump and his tariffs. Great minds think alike. The White House has no idea what it's doing with tariffs and keeps flip-flopping. Why even do an exemption if you're going to reverse it soon, said Ted Lieu, a Democrat from California, on April 13th. Now, many dismiss these reversals as mere incompetence or poor strategy, and it is true that narcissism is associated with more impulsive, error-prone decision-making. Anybody familiar with narcissistic abuse understands the deeper maneuver. Whether consciously or not, narcissists hold power by keeping others in a state of psychological whiplash, and it works. At its core, emotional control is the narcissist's primary goal: to protect a fragile sense of self-importance and entitlement by maintaining the grand illusion that supports it, without any empathy for others. Aggressive versions of narcissism use confusion, despair, emotional bonds like loyalty to control how others think and feel, to secure a constant flow of admiration or reactivity, to shield themselves from shame, and to keep others attached, even against their own best interests. Of the dizzying array of tactics, perhaps the most effective is crisis manufacturing. Autocrats love to manufacture crisis. The constant emergencies are not flukes, they're by design. They keep everyone in survival mode, distracting from deeper issues and ensuring the narcissist stays at the center of attention and control. In an interpersonal relationship, a narcissist will maybe have an explosive tantrum at you. They will threaten to try and get full custody of your kid, or they might have a frantic late night call to you where they fabricate something bad that happened to them, like they got mugged. But on a national stage, it takes the form of rhetorical escalations, legal threats, and emergency declarations designed to dominate the news cycle and overwhelm opposition, right? They call this shock and awe, shock doctrine. The nervous system can only take so much. Fight, rage, flight, escape planning, freeze, paralysis, fawn, capitulation, and flop, hopelessness, are natural survival responses. But they also keep us really stuck. Healing in therapy and in democracy begins by recognizing we're trapped in these states and learning how to return to the grounded, organized state of action. The author tries to help her patients understand they're not just anxious or distracted for no reason. They're reacting to a prolonged psychological coercion. The same is true for societies that are under narcissistic leadership. This isn't just politics, y'all. It's millions of nervous systems in fight or flight mode. I've watched many patients wrestle their way out of the fog of narcissistic control. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins with grieving what cannot be changed and focusing with fierce clarity on what remains within reach. It means reclaiming attention, setting boundaries, and refusing to give your power to someone who thrives on your reactivity. I'm also watching how this dynamic plays out with institutions. When law firms, universities, or political bodies bend to powerful figures instead of upholding shared values, it mirrors what happens in abusive households. Everyone walks on eggshells. In such environments, self-protection becomes the priority, and choices are made that are not in alignment with our values, but instead with fear. Recovery begins when people stop playing along and exhausting their energy. Instead of spending precious bandwidth on disbelief or outrage, the goal is to name the tactic, call out the harm, cultivate trusted support, and let go of what is beyond your control. Persistent engagement in shock, bargaining, or rumination often reflects the mind's attempt to delay the grief associated with profound loss. And we on a personal level and institutions on a larger level, we all have to accept our grief over what Trump has done. We've got to face it so that we can move forward. When Dorothy pulled back the curtain and revealed that the wizard was an insecure man with a microphone and a smoke machine, she shattered the illusion that had kept an entire city captive. In therapy, that moment of recognition is just as powerful. Once someone sees the manipulation for what it is, the spell begins to break. From a trauma psychologist's perspective, what can a nation do once the curtain is pulled back? First, stop enabling. Pause to strategize before rushing in to fix a narcissist's mess. Strategic restraint is a discipline, not weakness. This is a good time to Google the term gray rocking if you're not already familiar with it. Next, set boundaries. On a national scale, this means working together to reestablish constitutional guardrails, such as due process checks and balances. The Constitution is not just a legal structure, it's a psychological scaffolding against narcissistic control. I love that framing. Build resilience. Narcissistic abuse feeds on the distress and isolation it creates. It needs it to sustain itself, so you have to interrupt the cycle. Restore regulation and reinforce community power. Collective care and self-care are not luxuries right now. We need strength and safety in numbers. We need solidarity. Above all, keep faith in the long game. Trump runs on urgency and alarm. Deep change comes from staying calm, clear, and connected. We need to stop reacting and remember who we are.